You walk past the mirror, you catch a reflection and you think, ugh, that's disgusting. You feel immediately repulsed by what you're seeing. And in that moment, you decide that that is it, that you have to make a change. But this has been going on for years and you've not been able to make that change that you've told yourself that you should be making. Why is that? A life exists where you can see your reflection or walk past the mirror and see your body image and not feel absolutely repulsed by it. And it doesn't depend on you losing that 10, 15 kilos that you've been telling yourself that you have to lose for the last 15 years. I'm not saying that that might not be a part of it, but it's not dependent on it. Hi, my name's Clara. I'm a sport and exercise psychologist and fitness coach who helps self-critical gym goers stop pressing the fuck it button, stop being so all or nothing by working on their own self-compassion and self-acceptance. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you a bit more about why it is that you feel disgusted and repulsed by your own mirror image every time you see yourself, and what it is that you can do to change that without it being dependent on you losing weight. Because of the scope of the video, I'm not going to go into the context of fat phobia and the socially constructed beauty standards that we live in. What I'm talking about very much is your own lived experience of seeing yourself in a mirror and feeling immediately repulsed, like a kind of feeling, and wanting to either run away straight away and do something about it, or feel so repulsed that you feel hopeless and you feel like you're going to be stuck in these feelings forever. Now, why is this happening? The reason that you have this disgust feeling activated is because in seeing your own mirror reflection, you're experiencing shame. Like I said, the video does not have the scope for me to go into why we have absorbed or inherited shame from society, from family, etc. But the reality is that you are still having that shame reaction to seeing yourself in the mirror. Maybe you feel like you don't meet a certain societal standard. Maybe you feel like you don't meet your own standards. Maybe you see that your body has changed significantly over the last few years. Or maybe you have been telling yourself that you'd like to look differently for God knows how long, and you've still not been able to do the things that were important to you to be able to lead to that change materializing. Now, shame is one of the most difficult experiences that we get to experience as humans in many different ways. It shuts us down completely. Essentially, it activates our threat system. And our threat system can be categorized into either the fight or flight response or the freeze and flop response. And both of them are part of the threat system, but they lead to very different reactions. Fight or flight is very activating and makes us want to do something about it, whereas the freeze or flop is very inhibiting. Obviously, maybe it paralyzes us or it gets in the way of us being able to do something about that shame that we're noticing. Now, if you walk past the mirror, look at your body and think that that is absolutely disgusting and that activates your fight or flight system, what that is likely going to do is invite you to think about, in quite a panicked and anxious way, about how it is that you're going to do something to change how you look. You might immediately start making plans as to how you're going to exercise more. You might start making plans about how you're going to eat less. You might start making pretty extreme plans about how you're going to completely overhaul your life to essentially get rid of that feeling as quickly as possible. And that makes complete and utter sense, because nobody in their right mind wants to feel shame. Nobody in their right mind wants to feel that experience of disgust towards themselves. It's really distressing. It's incredibly unpleasant, and it can lead to a lot of problems in our life. It can get in the way of us doing a lot of things that are important to us. So it would make sense that you would notice that shame and feel compelled to do something about that. However, because that compulsion to do something about that is coming from that place of threat, then the way that you might start pursuing those goals will be in a very anxious and stressed type of mindset, in a very anxious and stressed type of way, which means that you are very likely to very quickly burn out from trying to do everything to the highest standard. You might be much more prone to setting yourself very high expectation goals that you might not actually be able to meet with your current resources in this given moment. And as a result of that, you might then encounter failure in pursuing those goals that are important to you, and in encountering that failure, bam, that shame's going to come straight back up and you're going to feel absolutely disgusted again, and it's going to reinforce this need to continually set goals that stretch you more and more and more, and you're going to go between that loop of being completely burnt out to feeling disgusted to feeling burnt out again, and get tangled up in this never-ending cycle of all or nothing. Similarly, if when you notice your mirror image and you feel that feeling of disgust, it could be that instead of your fight or flight response, you have your freeze or flop response activated, which again is very, very inhibitory, might make it incredibly difficult to feel like you can do anything about that. It might send you into a kind of hopelessness type of spiral, and through that hopelessness type of spiral, what you might find yourself wanting to do is soothe. And one of the most accessible ways to soothe is by utilizing food. it makes a lot of sense. When we eat, we activate our rest and digest system, our soothe system, and that in and of itself can pull us out of that threat. However, in observing ourselves eating to self-soothe, that shame will be reactivated again, and you will find yourself in that sort of paralysis, self-disgust, shame spiral, needing to soothe from that shame with food and going back and forth between these two. Now, I'm not saying that one response, the activating fight or flight, is mutually exclusive with the freeze, flop, seek food out to soothe response, right? Both of these could happen concurrently. For example, it might be that in seeing your body in the mirror image, you immediately feel so disgusted at yourself that you feel paralyzed, you feel helpless, you end up going into a binge spiral, and after a few days you feel so disgusted again, and this time you've got the justification of, look at how I was eating for the last few days. Now that activates the fight or flight system, and in activating that fight or flight system, you will make some grandiose plans as to how you're going to tackle this problem, how you're going to change your body composition. You will set yourself all of these goals, but because the high standards of the goals are so difficult for you to meet and you expect absolute perfection from yourself, you will eventually encounter a degree of failure based on the standards that you set for yourself. That failure is going to reinstigate that feeling of shame, and when you revisit that feeling of shame, you might feel so horrified in your failure that you have to soothe by utilizing food. And again, both of these responses lead to that constant spiraling and cycling between the all or nothing end of the spectrum for health and fitness in the broadest of senses. And I'm not implying that in seeing your mirror image and noticing that feeling of disgust that you shouldn't do something about that. But when that willingness to change comes from a place of threat, a place of I am disgusting, I'm horrible, I'm such a bad person, then the way that that is going to lead to you pursuing those goals is going to be incredibly unhelpful, because it is coming from that place of not feeling good enough, of having a disgust response to yourself immediately. And that's really distressing. And of course, that's really difficult to sustain. Nobody in their right mind wants to do something that feels atrocious, that feels very punitive, that feels like it's coming from a place of disgust. You're not good enough. And to make matters worse, if you feel disgusted by your own body image to begin with, and your ongoing pursuit of the goals or the things that you're trying to do to change that continue to be permeated by that feeling of self-directed disgust, then it doesn't matter how much you change, because your mind isn't changing. Your body could be changing, but the way that you feel about yourself will not change. And so many of you have felt like this before. So many of you have gone, have lost weight, have achieved the body, and guess what? You still felt like shit about yourself. Why? Because the pursuit of that goal came from a place of not feeling good enough to begin with, or feeling self-disgust. And if you don't change that mindset, then it doesn't matter what you do, you will not be happy when. The same kind of goes for anybody who's felt fat throughout their lives, looks back at pictures and goes, holy shit, I didn't realize I was so not fat then. I can't believe I thought I looked fat. Why was that? Because you had that mindset of feeling self-directed disgust, of not feeling good enough. And unless you change that, you could be doing a million different fat loss phases with a million different coaches that are going to promise you the world, and nothing is going to change, because if you're not working in, then no amount of working out, no amount of changing the exterior is going to feel enough. And that is a problem. Obviously, the risk is that you end up stuck in this all or nothing cycle, but the more you loop around this cycle, the more likely you are to end up in either extremes of being incredibly either underweight or very, very, very dependent on exercise and food control, or on the other side of the spectrum, you're more likely to become overweight, carry excess weight, or find yourself struggling more and more to feel in control with food and or with exercise, struggling with motivation, etc. So the more you go through this cycle without addressing your psychology, without working with someone who can actually support you in the psychology of working in and working out, and in the practicalities of that, the more precarious it's going to be, the more into the extreme you're going to go, and the harder it's then going to be to work your way back to a much more balanced and much more sustainable approach, back into a place where you actually can feel good enough. Again, without that being dependent on how you look, while still considering that that might form a part of how you can learn to feel good enough about yourself. And I personally believe that it's not so much about how we look, it's about how we feel about the things that we're doing. When we feel like we are showing up in line with our values, irrespective of how we look, if we know and we can hand on heart say that we are doing everything that we can to do the things that matter to us from a health and fitness perspective, then we're far less likely to be as tangled up or as dependent. Our happiness is less likely to be dependent on that sort of tangible physical outcome, because we are observing ourselves showing up in line with our values, in line with the things that are actually important to us. And I don't need to tell you anything you don't already know, but the fact that you feel disgusted by your own mirror image is costing you so much happiness. It is costing you memories. It is costing you going out with your mates and being so distracted by how uncomfortable you feel within yourself that you're not even paying attention to what they're saying. You're not actually connecting. You're not even wanting to get your photo taken. Maybe you've missed out on photos with young family members because you felt so atrocious in yourself that now you don't have any pictures with them when they were younger, and you know that you're going to regret it later in life, but you can't bear to see yourself reflected in the picture. And that not being able to bear seeing yourself in a picture is leading you to feel more and more unhappy in yourself. It's making you want to be more and more extreme in the changes that you make with yourself. It's making you want to set higher and higher pressure goals. It's making you feel more and more like a failure. It is not contributing to your well-being in any shape or form. It's not adding to your meaning in your life. It's not adding to fulfillment. It has cost you enough already. And this is what you have to do to change that. Unfortunately for you, the solution is to learn how to be more self-compassionate and more self-accepting. And I know when you already feel disgusted by yourself, the thought of being compassionate or self-accepting feels icky as hell. It feels incredibly uncomfortable, and it might even give rise to some fear, because what if I accept myself as I am? What if that means that it then becomes stuck in being the way that I am? I don't think I can live like that. I know, I understand it, but that is not what self-compassion and self-acceptance are about. What feels like something incredibly passive actually empowers you, because if you can accept yourself as you are now, if you can accept how you have come to be in the here and now, if you can work with someone like myself who can help you understand that it is not your fault that you've maybe struggled so much to feel good enough, to learn to be comfortable with yourself, when you can learn to access that type of thinking, you can start to realize that in meeting yourself where you're at by being self-accepting, you're far less likely to, in the experience of shame, set yourself goals that far exceed your current capacities to be able to meet them. In doing that, you're far more likely to set goals that you can actually meet, goals that are actually going to meet you where you're at, goals that are actually going to invite you to succeed and not fail, because you are taking care of yourself. You are setting goals from a place of wanting to tend to yourself. If you look at your mirror image and go, how is that going to make you excited to tend to your needs? How is that going to make you want to take care of yourself in a compassionate way, in a way that invites you to exercise if that feels important to you, to tend to your nutrition if that feels important to you? It's not going to happen. And that is why learning to be self-accepting by coming to understand how you've arrived in this moment, compassionately knowing that it's not your fault, learning to not judge yourself, and in doing that, developing the psychological skills that can help you learn to cope with that feeling of self-disgust, reassure yourself without using food. In the presence of that feeling of self-disgust, reassure yourself without setting extreme goals. In that situation, when you can do all of those things, it becomes far easier to feel empowered to start to do the things that matter. And I'm not talking about being toxically positive. I'm not talking about standing in front of the mirror and saying, I love myself so much, because that doesn't fucking work. Because telling yourself up here, I am enough, and feeling that you're enough down here are not the same thing. So this isn't a matter of toxic positivity. This is a matter of learning how to be kind, how to actually care for yourself, how to learn to accept yourself, and how to nurture that so that it motivates you to do the things that are important to you, but from a place of caring, from a place of caring for yourself. Because when you can care for yourself in the presence of shame, in the presence of self-disgust, you're not going to want to numb it and get rid of it by overeating, by binging. If you care for yourself, you're not going to want to go and punish yourself at the gym because you care for yourself. The two are just mutually exclusive. It can't happen at the same time. So if in the presence of self-disgust, you notice that wave of shame, and that wave of shame makes you want to self-soothe with food by binging and overeating, or you notice that at that same time time as you're binging and overeating. You're making plans of how you're going to get rid of the excess body fat that you have on your body, and you're planning on how you're going to over exercise and cut your food and do this extreme transformation in the next 3 days. Trust me when I say that learning how to be more accepting of yourself and learning how to practice self-compassion is the change that is actually going to help you achieve that feeling of no longer experiencing self-disgust in response to your body image when reflected in a mirror. And working with me will help you achieve just that, because unlike other fitness coaches that will promise you body confidence and will only help you achieve that by making it dependent on weight loss, I can help you feel confident in your body and actually care for yourself and like yourself when you are going through that process of change and in achieving that change. Because I'm a psychologist and a coach, and it means that I can blend both skill sets together to help you work in on your mind and work out to achieve those changes. And learning how to be self-compassionate and self-accepting in this world is incredibly difficult, so stop trying to go at it alone and head to the description, click the link and inquire to work with me today. Thanks so much as always for watching the video. I hope that you found it helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.